I was sitting there in front of the TV, pretending to care about the baseball game. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon. Rebecca had just served up a roast beef dinner, one of her specialties. While she cleaned up the dishes in the kitchen, I kept my eyes on the screen, well, sort of. Every time she wasn't facing me, I found myself watching her instead. Rebecca's a beautiful woman. Maybe not the kind that turns every head in a room, but she's got a charm that's hard to miss. She's tall, with curves that turn heads, light brown hair that brushes her shoulders, and these big, brown eyes that can really pull you in. Something about the way she looks at you, yeah, it still gets me. We've been married for 8 years now. We've got 2 sweet little girls, Lily is 6, and Chloe just turned 5. Since both of us work full-time, my mom helps by watching the kids during the day, and either Rebecca or I swing by to pick them up after work. Not long after Chloe was born, I had a vasectomy. We'd agreed 2 kids was the right number for us. But that day, I wasn't thinking about our daughters, even though they were quietly playing in their room down the hall. What had my attention were the changes I'd started noticing in Rebecca these past few months. Her wardrobe had shifted, new outfits, more stylish than before, and she was putting in longer hours at work. Nothing dramatic on its own, but when you looked at the whole picture, it started to feel off. Even the way she acted at home had shifted. There was something different in her energy, like her mind was always somewhere else. We'd sit together watching a show or a movie, and I'd make a comment, but her replies made it clear she wasn't really paying attention. Her eyes were on the screen, sure, but her thoughts seemed a million miles away. At night in bed, things were still active between us. We were intimate a couple of times a week, but even then, she'd toss and turn for hours afterward before finally drifting off. I could feel something was bothering her, something she wasn't telling me. I didn't want to push her, though. Asking outright felt risky, like it might make her close up even more. I figured maybe she'd come around and talk when she was ready. We used to share everything, so why was she keeping this to herself? One thing Rebecca was always great at was cooking. She loved trying out new recipes, and she'd often search online for new ideas or swap tips with other food lovers. I even knew the username she used in those forums, Becky. It was a nickname her dad used to call her, and I saw it once when I passed by while she was on the computer. Almost every night, she joined this cooking chat room. It was supposed to be about recipes, but I couldn't help feeling like there was more going on there. One evening, as I watched her clear the table, a thought hit me: why not log into that same chat room under a fake name and see what kind of conversations were happening? At first, I considered pretending to be someone else and chatting with her directly, without her realizing it was me. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt wrong. It just didn't sit right with me, especially the risk of her catching on. So I dropped the idea. For a while. Another week passed, and things didn't improve. Rebecca stayed distant, and even our daughters seemed to be getting less of her attention at home. That's when I decided I couldn't just sit back anymore. I needed to find out what was really going on. The next day at work, I created a profile on the same chat platform Rebecca used. I picked the username NewMom, hoping that pretending to be a woman would make folks in the group more comfortable talking to me. I figured it would help me blend in. Rebecca usually logged into the chat around 8 p.m., once the girls were tucked in for the night. That Tuesday, I was ready. The moment I saw her heading to the small room near the bathroom where she kept her computer, I told her I was going downstairs to catch up on some paperwork. She nodded, not saying much, and I headed straight to my office. I fired up my laptop and logged into the chat room. A few women were already there, talking about cheesecake recipes. I waited, eyes scanning the list of usernames for Becky to pop up. About 5 minutes went by, and still no sign of her. One of the women in the chat sent me a message, asking if I had a favorite cheesecake recipe. Truth was, I didn't know the first thing about baking. So I told her I was new to it all and just wanted to learn from the pros. Right after I hit send, I saw it: Becky had joined the chat. That was Rebecca. Soon enough, everyone started chiming in with their tips for cheesecake: what kind of cheese to use, how much, the best baking tricks. The chat room filled up fast, at least at 20 people talking all at once. It was hard to keep up. I asked Becky if she could send me her recipe by email. I gave her a new Hotmail address I'd set up just for this plan. The very next day at work, I opened my inbox and saw an email from Becky with her cheesecake recipe inside. I was feeling a strange kind of excitement because now I had her email address. It was a new one I hadn't seen before, and that alone caught me off guard. Rebecca had never hidden anything from me before, or at least I'd believe she hadn't. The fact that she had an email account I didn't even know about stirred up this uneasy feeling in my gut. I carried that guilt with me all day. The idea that I was pretending to be someone else right under her nose felt wrong. I knew she could never find out that new mom was actually her husband. The following day, I sent her an email, pretending I had baked the cheesecake she'd shared with me. I told her it turned out amazing and that my husband had absolutely loved it. That small lie kicked off a chain of messages between us, and before long, we started emailing more regularly. Eventually, we took things outside the cooking chat room. We added each other as friends on the site, which made it easier to talk anytime, not just when the baking crowd was around. Meanwhile, things at home were continuing to slide. Over the next couple of weeks, Rebecca grew even more distant. The warmth we used to share was fading fast. Our time together in the bedroom dropped to once a week, and even then, it felt like her heart wasn't in it. She barely moved, stayed in one position the whole time. It felt like she was just going through the motions. Like she was there physically, but not emotionally. Even so, the messages between Sophie and Becky kept flowing. The more we talked, the less guilty I felt. I told myself that I was doing this for a reason. I needed to understand what was really going on with Rebecca so I could try to save our marriage. Things weren't right, and they hadn't been for a while. She was pulling away not just from me, but from our kids too. That light in her had started to dim, and I had no idea what had caused it. All I knew was, I needed to find out. Despite how distant she'd become, I still saw her as a good mom. She'd always put our daughters first. But something was clearly weighing on her, something heavy, and I couldn't shake the suspicion that she might be involved with someone else. I was ready to do whatever it took to get to the bottom of it. Hiring a private investigator wasn't realistic, we just didn't have the money. And keeping tabs on her at work wasn't going to happen either. I barely knew anything about her office or the people she worked with. We both held down full-time jobs. She worked for a large law firm, and I was with a big bank. Our schedules were nearly identical, so sneaking around wasn't an option. So one evening, during our online chat, I decided to take things to a more personal level. By that point, Sophie and Becky had gotten pretty friendly. It felt like the right time to start asking deeper questions. I told her my name was Sophie, and that I lived in Georgia. Without hesitation, she replied that her name was Rebecca and she lived in Indiana. Then she asked me, "Sophie, what do you do for work?" Rebecca went on to explain that she was a legal secretary at a law firm, handling contracts and helping with legal paperwork. She turned the question around on me, so I had to think fast. I told her I wasn't working at the moment. I was on maternity leave, but planned to go back soon as a bank teller. That's when Rebecca shared, "Oh, my husband works at a bank too. His name's Robert, and he's a programmer there." "What's your husband's name?" It was surreal. She was talking about me and didn't even realize it. I couldn't believe how much personal information she was freely offering up. I told her my husband's name was Grant, and that he sold insurance. After that, we steered the conversation back to cooking and a few light topics. I didn't want to push too hard too soon, so I decided to save the deeper questions for another night. We didn't get to chat again for the next 2 evenings. On the third day, I sent her an email saying my bank manager had called me in unexpectedly and asked me to return to work a week earlier than planned, with extra pay to sweeten the deal. I told her I felt both nervous and excited about going back. It was all part of a story I'd come up with, one where Sophie had been unfaithful at work. My plan was simple: if I shared a fictional affair of my own, maybe Rebecca would feel safe enough to open up about any secrets she might be keeping. If she was cheating, I hoped she'd relate to Sophie and let her guard down. Rebecca responded to the email. "You said going back to work made you nervous. Why, Sophie?" I replied, "I'm not sure I should say this, but you're the closest friend I've got right now, and I feel like I can trust you." I just hope you won't think badly of me when I tell you what I've done. Her response came quickly. Sophie, everyone slips up sometimes. We're only human. What happened? Did you take money from the bank? I shook my head at the screen and typed back, no, nothing like that. I met a man at work, his name's Marco. It started out innocent, just conversations during lunch breaks. But things changed between us. We got closer. A lot closer, if you know what I mean. I laid out this fake story about how the affair had been going on for over a year. I told her how we met every Friday after work, how the time with him felt exciting and new, but how I still loved my husband. I said I didn't want to lose my marriage, even though I'd made a huge mistake. Rebecca didn't reply right away. She didn't ask questions or interrupt. I imagined her sitting at her desk in that small room downstairs, staring at the screen, thinking about what I'd said, maybe seeing parts of her own life reflected in it. If she was hiding something, I had a feeling this story hit a nerve. Eventually, she broke the silence with a question that appeared slowly, one word at a time. But, you just had a baby. Are you sure your husband is the father? That one hit hard. I stared at the message for a moment before answering. Sophie, honestly. I don't know, I typed. And that's why he can never find out about the affair. Next, I pretended to break down emotionally. I typed that I was too upset to keep chatting and had to step away. It was all part of the act, and I hoped it would strike a chord with Rebecca. Later that evening, I walked into the kitchen and found her sitting on the couch in front of the TV. But it was obvious she wasn't actually watching, her eyes were fixed on the screen, yet her mind seemed somewhere else, as it had been lately. I sat down beside her and gently took her hand. When she looked at me, I saw her eyes were red and puffy, she'd been crying. We talked briefly, and after a few quiet moments, she suggested we head to bed. I took that as a sign that she wanted to be close, maybe even intimate. I didn't hesitate. It had been a week since we'd last been together, and I was craving that connection. That night, we made love, and then we held each other for a long time, just lying there, wrapped up in each other until we both drifted off to sleep. It felt like a small piece of what we used to have. The next day at work, my thoughts kept circling back to the night before. I couldn't help but wonder, was this false online friendship I'd created with my own wife actually helping? Sure, it had led to some intimacy, but I hadn't really uncovered anything new about what was going on with her. I realized that if I wanted her to open up to Sophie, I needed to build more trust between them. I had to make Rebecca feel like she wasn't alone, that her new friend also carried secrets of her own. Over the weekend, there was no communication between Rebecca and Sophie. But come Monday, I sent her an email from work, pretending I was excited about a conversation I'd supposedly had with Marco, our first one in 3 months. I played it up like I had big news to share and was eager to talk. That evening, after we'd put the girls to bed, I went down to my home office in the basement, logged on, and waited for Rebecca to join the chat. When she finally popped online, I started the conversation with enthusiasm. I'm so glad we're chatting tonight. I've got some great news, I typed. Rebecca responded with a playful tone, teasing that she could probably guess why I was in such a good mood. Sophie, I bet Marco reached out, didn't he? I played along. He did. He finally talked to me again, and I could tell he still has feelings. It really made my day. Rebecca asked, but if he cares so much, why didn't he reach out all those months? Why the silence? I replied, well, I think my husband Grant was starting to catch on. I'm almost certain he's been monitoring the house phone. And checking my cell? That's easy, he can just look through the bill. Marco knew that, so calling wasn't an option. Rebecca pressed further. But why didn't you just meet him at a motel, like before, when you were still working? That's when I took the story further. That wasn't possible, I wrote. I was pregnant at the time, and honestly, I didn't feel good about myself. And I doubt Marco wanted anything to do with me while I was in that condition. We kept the conversation going for another half hour or so. But I could tell something was off. Rebecca didn't seem very impressed with the version of Marco I created. And that was exactly what I was aiming for. I wanted him to come across as selfish and shallow, your typical unfaithful partner. My goal was to paint a clear picture of how damaging affairs could be. Rebecca and Sophie didn't chat on Tuesday, but Wednesday night, we reconnected. And this time, things changed. Rebecca began to open up. She started sharing things that she hadn't told anyone, not even me. We chatted for over an hour, and by the end of it, I had confirmation of something I had feared all along: she was involved with someone else. His name was Eric Dalton. Not only was Eric her boss at the law firm, but he was also married and had a child of his own. I recognized the name. Rebecca had mentioned him before, but it had been months since she'd brought him up in conversation. She told Sophie their relationship had started nearly a year ago during a work trip to Charlotte for a legal convention. That trip. I remembered it well. At the time, she told me she was going with another secretary and made it sound like it was just the two of them attending. She'd said the convention was important for her performance review and might help her get a raise. What she didn't mention was that her boss would be there too, or that anything had happened between them. Rebecca explained that on their first night in Charlotte, after a group dinner with colleagues, she and Eric stayed behind at the hotel lounge for a couple of drinks. The night ended with him inviting her up to his room. One glass of wine turned into more, and that led to their first night together. She admitted she felt guilty afterward. She even said she regretted it. But then, the very next night, she went back to his room again, and this time, she stayed the whole night. Reading those words hit me like a punch to the chest. My own wife, the mother of my children, had betrayed me in a way I couldn't fully grasp. She didn't just slip up once, she went back. She made a choice. I needed to know more. So I kept the conversation going, pressing gently for more details. Rebecca didn't hold back. She told Sophie that when they got back from the convention, she tried to distance herself from Eric for a few weeks. But he kept reaching out, and eventually, she gave in. Their affair picked back up, and this time, it became a regular thing. At first, they met secretly in his office after hours. But eventually, they started booking a room at the Hilton, meeting there once a week. Sometimes, they'd still sneak around at the office during the day. The anger that welled up inside me was overwhelming. I can't even put it into words. I had to physically stop myself from confronting her right then and there. But once the rage began to cool, it turned into something colder, something calculated. I wanted revenge. I wanted her to feel what I felt. That pain. That betrayal. At that point, as Sophie, I asked her the question that had been eating away at me since I learned the truth: do you love him? Her response came quickly and without hesitation. No, she said. I don't love Eric. She told Sophie that, despite everything, she loved her husband more than anyone, but when it came to Eric, the physical connection was something she couldn't seem to resist. She described it like an addiction, something she kept going back to even when she knew it was wrong. She admitted the affair had been going on for more than a year now, and that they were meeting 3 or 4 times a week. That was more than she'd been with me, her own husband. I couldn't help but think back to all the times I tried to be close to her, only to be met with excuses. She always had a reason: tired, stressed, not in the mood. But here she was, telling Sophie how eager she was to be with Eric. The way she talked about their encounters made it clear they weren't just casual slip-ups. She was giving him something that should have only ever belonged to me. It felt like I was the one carrying all the emotional weight while he got to enjoy her without any of the consequences. No wonder I'd noticed the shift in her behavior. Deep down, part of me had already known. I started to wonder, was she planning to leave me for him? Was Eric in love with her? Did he see her as something more than just a fling? Or was it all about the rush, the secrecy, the thrill of sneaking around with someone else's wife? After more than an hour of chatting, I felt completely drained. There were still so many things I didn't understand, but I needed time to sit with what I'd just learned. So I signed off, telling her that the baby needed my attention, and promised we'd talk again in a day or two. What's a man supposed to do when he realizes his world is falling apart? When the woman he thought was his partner in life, his wife and the mother of his children, is also someone else's lover, multiple times a week? And then to hear her say that being with him felt addictive, like she couldn't stop? Sure, she said she loved me more. But how do you square that with her actions? How could she say she loves our daughters, loves me, and at the same time lie to our faces every single day? She was lost in a world of temptation and pleasure, while I was left stuck in a world of heartache, loneliness, and pain. And that's when I made up my mind. I was going to make her pay for what she'd done to our family. My idea of justice? Taking away what meant the most to her, our girls. I made a quiet vow to file for divorce and do everything in my power to get full custody. If I succeeded, I'd move to another state and make it hard for her to see them. I wanted her to feel the same kind of agony she caused me day after day. I also planned to reach out to Eric's wife and let her know exactly what was going on behind her back. And if possible, I'd look into legal action against the law firm where this whole thing started. They created the environment that helped destroy my marriage. But first, I needed evidence. I had to be smart about this. Even though pretending everything was fine around Rebecca was becoming harder by the day, I knew I had to keep it together. Thankfully, she was so wrapped up in her own world, in her secret double life, that she didn't notice how broken I felt. To her, everything probably seemed like business as usual. 2 days had passed since her last message to Sophie. That morning, I emailed her pretending to be Sophie again, asking if she was up for a chat that evening. She replied yes, said she'd be online at the usual time. I already had a list of questions ready, ones I knew would hurt to hear the answers to, but that I had to ask. I was sitting at my computer before the girls were even asleep, just waiting. The second she logged in, I sent a message. Sophie, I'm so relieved we're talking again, she typed. I've been thinking non-stop about what we talked about last time. I hope I didn't say too much or make you think poorly of me. I replied, who am I to judge? I've done worse. We're human, Rebecca. Talking to you has helped me more than you know. I don't really have anyone else to open up to. I used to tell my husband everything, but this isn't something I can ever share with him. She asked, do you think your husband has any idea about what's going on? No, I typed. He doesn't suspect a thing. He trusts me completely. But if he ever found out, it wouldn't be good. He can be intense when he's angry, and I don't want to set him off. Then she brought something up from before. You mentioned your husband had a vasectomy after your youngest was born. Aren't you worried Eric might get you pregnant? I answered, I've been on the pill for over a year now, ever since things started with Eric. So no, I'm not worried. She replied, but you must be hiding those pills. Your husband can't know about them, right? Yeah, I said. I keep them stashed in his shoebox in the back of my closet. I take the pill every morning while he's in the shower. I could almost feel her satisfaction coming through the screen. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was like she enjoyed the fact that she was pulling this off, right under my nose. She wasn't just lying, she was taking pride in how well she was deceiving me. And then, I finally asked the question I'd been holding in. Are you thinking about leaving your husband for Eric? Her reply came fast. No, that's not going to happen. I really do love my husband. I don't have feelings for Eric. Being with him is exciting, sure, but it's just that. It's physical. There's no love there. That's what's tearing me apart. I want to keep seeing him, but I can't let my husband find out. So, you're trying to have both, huh? I asked. Think you'll be able to keep this up without your husband ever finding out? He won't, she said confidently. Eric and I are very careful, she typed. Besides, he has his own marriage to worry about. If his wife ever found out, it would be a disaster for him. Then Rebecca asked Sophie something that made my stomach turn. Is Eric better in bed than your husband? Is he bigger? She answered without hesitation. My husband's a wonderful lover, she wrote, but Eric, he's just different. It's not so much about the size, though yes, he is slightly larger. But it's the danger of it all, the excitement, the risk of getting caught, that adds to it. With my husband, it feels like making love. With Eric, it's more about physical closeness, you know what I mean? Reading her words, I was stunned. My wife was casually discussing her affair like it was a game, something thrilling and harmless. I couldn't believe how lightly she treated it, as if it weren't tearing our family apart. I had to press further, even if it meant risking her friendship with Sophie. Don't you think you're neglecting your husband? I typed. He must be feeling pushed aside because of this whole thing with Eric. There was a long pause. Then finally, she replied, maybe. That one word said it all. It was clear she hadn't given much thought to the damage she was causing, not just to me, but to our kids, too. She went on, we still have our moments. Not as often, but I don't think he minds. He loves me deeply. But I can't be with him right after seeing Eric. He'd know something was off. I pressed again, gently. Aren't you worried he might start looking elsewhere? I mean, if he's feeling ignored, that could happen. Her reply came slower this time. I hadn't thought of it that way. Now you've got me worried. I'm not trying to scare you, I said, just something to think about. From there, we moved to lighter topics. But just before we wrapped up, Rebecca mentioned something that hit me like a truck. She told Sophie, almost excitedly, about an upcoming trip to Charlotte, one she was planning to take with Eric. She hadn't said a single word to me about it. That night, both of us had trouble sleeping. I didn't try to get close to her, and she didn't make a move either. We just lay there in silence, both restless. As I stared up at the ceiling, I made a decision. I was going to talk to her the next day face to face and try, one last time, to figure out if there was anything left to save. The next morning, we were sitting at the kitchen table, and I brought it up. Rebecca, I said, have you noticed how little we've been together lately? Our intimacy has dropped off so much. We used to be close several times a week, and now it's barely once. It's been nearly 2 weeks since the last time. Is something going on? Are you seeing someone else? Her fork froze midair. She looked stunned. In all our 8 years of marriage, I had never asked her something so direct. You're really bold, Robert, she said. She only called me that when she was upset it was always Bobby, unless she wanted to make a point. She gave me a look of disbelief and frustration. How can you question my loyalty? After everything I do? I'm managing work and home, and yeah, sometimes things cool off a little in a marriage. That's normal. It's not fair for you to accuse me like this. I'm not accusing you, I said gently, but something has changed, Rebecca. Even the girls sense it. They hardly come to you with their worries anymore. They come to me. That struck a nerve. Her face grew even more tense. Well, maybe that's because I can't do everything. There are only 24 hours in a day, and I can't be there for every little thing. You're the father, pitch in. She realized what she'd just said. It was in her face the moment she realized she'd stepped too far. Calling her own kids a burden? She couldn't take those words back. Her expression quickly shifted from anger to something else, regret, maybe even guilt. She stood up suddenly and walked off to the bedroom without another word. It hit me then. There was no use trying to have an honest conversation. When people know they're cornered, sometimes they run or cry just to avoid facing the truth. And Rebecca? She did both. That Saturday afternoon, as she headed out on her usual shopping trip, probably looking for something new to wear for that Charlotte getaway with Eric, I took my chance. With the kids busy in their room, I went into ours and started searching. It took about 15 minutes, but I found what I was looking for, the birth control pills. Just like she told Sophie, they were tucked away in a shoebox in her closet, sitting beneath a pair of shoes. There was a plastic case with the current pack, plus 2 more sealed ones, untouched. That confirmed it, she'd been on the pill for at least a year, which lined up exactly with the start of her affair with Eric. And knowing I had a vasectomy, if she ever turned up pregnant, there'd be no way to explain it without admitting the truth. As I sat on the edge of our bed holding that pill case, a flood of emotions hit me: anger, sorrow, and even a strange kind of pity. This wasn't the woman I married. Not the same woman who used to care so deeply about us, about me. somewhere along the way, I had lost her. Or maybe she'd chosen to leave, and I just hadn't seen it until now. I stared down at the pill dispenser, thinking about our daughters and what kind of future they'd have if this went on. One thing I knew for certain, this marriage was over. And there was no way I was going to let Rebecca raise our girls on her own. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I sat there, clutching the evidence of her betrayal. That grief quickly turned into something else, something colder. I wasn't just heartbroken anymore. I wanted justice. I wanted her and Eric to feel what I was feeling. And right then, through that fog of emotion, a plan started to take shape. A dangerous plan. One that no decent man would ever consider, but I wasn't feeling very decent anymore. By that point, my heart didn't have room left for mercy or forgiveness. Bitterness had taken over, and anger followed close behind. I felt numb and cold, like whatever good had been inside me had been replaced by a quiet fury. I went to her closet, carefully removed one of her birth control pills from the case, and slipped it into my pocket. Then I packed up our daughters and took them over to my mom's place, saying I had some errands to run. After dropping them off, I headed to the pharmacy. I spent nearly 30 minutes slowly walking up and down the aisles, studying the shelves for what I needed. Eventually, I picked up 2 bottles, one contained baby aspirin, and the other was labeled for liver health. Both had small, round, white tablets that looked similar in shape and color to Rebecca's pills. The aspirin seemed like the better match, just a bit thicker, but almost identical otherwise. Back at home, I sat at the kitchen table comparing one of her real pills to the aspirin. It fit inside her dispenser well enough. Close enough that she wouldn't notice. Then, one by one, I swapped out the pills in her current pack. Once it was done, I returned everything exactly where it had been and drove back to pick up the girls. I hoped they wouldn't mention the trip to Grandma's house, but even if they did, I had already come up with a story, just in case. Life rolled on. That following Tuesday, Rebecca casually told me she'd be heading to another conference in Charlotte, supposedly with another secretary from her office. She didn't offer a name, and I didn't ask. I didn't need to, because I already knew who she'd really be with. While she was away, she never called home, not once. Our daughters didn't even seem to notice, but I did. I felt her absence in a way that was hard to describe. The day after she left, I used a payphone and called her office, asking for Eric Dalton. The receptionist told me he was out of town and wouldn't be back until next week. I didn't need any more proof. I knew exactly where he was and who he was with. When Rebecca returned home, she greeted me with a warm hug, as if nothing had happened. That night, after putting the girls to bed, she led me to our room. We were intimate for nearly 2 hours. It was hard not to wonder, was she doing this to ease her guilt? Was she trying to make up for not calling? Or maybe she felt bad for the awful things she'd said about our daughters during that argument. Whatever the reason, I could feel her trying to reconnect, using intimacy as some kind of offering. It wasn't just about passion. It felt like she was trying to patch something up. But the cracks ran deep. Over the last year, it felt like Eric had slowly taken over my place in her life. I was the fallback. The second choice. She might not have realized it, but her actions made it crystal clear. Still, being with her that night, holding her, feeling close to her again, it gave me something I didn't even know I was craving. It felt like coming up for air after being underwater too long. But even as we lay there afterward, I hadn't lost sight of what she'd done. No matter how much I still loved her, the pain didn't go away. I was still set on making her pay. Rebecca continued to chat with Sophie, our bi-weekly conversations rolling on as if nothing had changed. I kept pretending to rekindle things with my imaginary Marco, crafting fake stories of passion and secrecy to prompt her into sharing more about Eric. And it worked. She began opening up again, sharing details about what they'd done together. Things she had never done with me, no matter how long we'd been married. It crushed me to read it, each new message feeling like a punch to the gut. She kept saying she loved me more than anyone, but her actions, what she did with Eric, told a different story. Despite everything, I kept checking the pills. Day by day, I watched them disappear from the dispenser. Each time she finished a pack, I replaced the next one with more aspirin, always careful, always quiet. I still had her real birth control pills hidden away in my office, just in case. Then, something changed. A few weeks later, I started noticing a shift in Rebecca. She became warmer. More present. She paid more attention to the girls and even to me. It wasn't a huge transformation, but it was there. Something had softened in her. But that didn't last long. About 2 weeks after her Charlotte trip, she came home one afternoon looking pale and shaken. When I asked what was wrong, she broke into tears and disappeared into the bedroom. She didn't say a word. I had my suspicions. And later, when I checked her dispenser, I saw she hadn't taken her pill for the last 2 days. That was it. Rebecca was pregnant. I didn't need a test. I didn't need her to say the words. I already knew. She had stopped taking the pills because of the pregnancy. And knowing I'd had a vasectomy, there was no chance I was the father. As soon as I had the chance, I swapped out the aspirin in the dispenser with her real birth control pills. I did it just in case she started questioning things or decided to check them. If she told anyone the pills had failed, I wanted her to find nothing out of the ordinary. Things were spiraling, and fast. I could feel that the fallout from her 15-month affair was about to explode into real consequences. All those moments of thrill, secrecy, and betrayal were now leading her straight into the storm. Even though I tried to talk to her about what was bothering her, she wouldn't open up. She didn't confess. Not about the pregnancy. Not about Eric. She just kept pretending everything was fine, like she could keep living both lives. And even if she had come clean in that moment, it wouldn't have changed my decision to divorce her and fight for full custody. But maybe it would have stopped me from taking things further. Instead, she chose to lie. Even as she carried a child that wasn't mine, she stayed silent. I wasn't ready to let her know what I knew. Not yet. I still needed more concrete proof of her affair. I had plans to sue her employer for allowing the affair to fester and ruin our marriage, and I needed every detail I could get. It had been a couple of weeks since Rebecca last spoke to Sophie, just before her Charlotte trip. I wanted to see if she would mention the pregnancy to her trusted friend. That night, as soon as I saw her settle in at the computer after we'd put the kids to bed, I rushed to the basement and logged in. I was ready to talk. Rebecca started opening up again in her chats with Sophie, sharing details about her recent trip to Charlotte. She spoke with excitement about how much she enjoyed spending those nights with Eric, even admitting they'd spent most of their time together being intimate. She didn't hold back, painting those nights as some kind of escape, something thrilling and fulfilling. On a whim, Sophie asked her the big question, would she ever leave her husband for Eric? To my surprise, Rebecca's answer was firm. She said she'd never leave me. She claimed to love me deeply and insisted her relationship with Eric was strictly physical, without any emotional strings attached. But what caught me off guard even more was what came next. Rebecca told Sophie she wanted to end the affair altogether. She said she was ready to focus on being a devoted wife again, to fix what had been broken. Still, not once did she mention her pregnancy. If she truly believed we could just go back to how things were before all of this, before over a year of lies, betrayal, and stolen intimacy, she was fooling herself. She had given Eric the closeness, passion, and connection that should have been reserved for me. Then, one Friday evening, she finally told Sophie the truth. She was pregnant with Eric's child. They were planning to go to a private clinic in a small town called Rocky River. The appointment was in 2 weeks, and they'd stay a couple of days afterward so she could recover. I took note of every detail. I documented it all, word for word. The next morning, I took the day off work and drove to Rocky River, about an hour away. I went straight to the clinic and, pretending to be Rebecca's husband, confirmed the appointment under her name. It was scheduled for the 14th. They even gave me a printed confirmation slip, complete with the clinic's stamp. I also made note of the doctor assigned to her case, Dr. Adam Pierce. A week later, while we were having dinner as a family, Rebecca brought up another important work conference. She said she'd be heading to Charlotte again, just for a couple of nights, and assured me this would be her last work trip. I barely reacted. She noticed. I think she was surprised that I didn't protest or show concern, but what she didn't know was that I already knew the real reason for the trip. Her affair was winding down, and this trip was about ending it on their terms. But for me, it was already far too late to mend anything. When the 14th arrived, I took the day off again. That morning, Rebecca left early, kissed me goodbye, and drove herself to the airport in her Toyota, where Eric would meet her and take her to Rocky River. She thought I'd be heading into work as usual. Instead, I followed behind hours later and parked near the clinic, close enough to watch the entrance without being seen. When they arrived, I stayed hidden but managed to get clear photographs of both of them walking into the clinic together. Once I was sure they were inside, I quietly left and drove home. By the afternoon of the 16th, I was already back, having secretly arranged 2 weeks off work to handle everything. When Rebecca returned home later that day, she looked tired and seemed a little surprised to see me there. But everything was already in motion. On the morning she'd left for Rocky River, I had met with my lawyer. Later that same day, I visited her workplace and asked to speak with Stephen Whitaker, the president of the law firm where Rebecca worked. I told him everything, the affair with her supervisor, Eric Dalton, the pregnancy, and the clinic visit in Rocky River for the abortion. I made it clear that I was filing for divorce, and I intended to sue the firm as well. I told him I had evidence, photos, messages, timelines, all of it. I also let him know that I was prepared to take this to court and make the details public if needed. Knowing what kind of scandal that could cause, Stephen Whitaker asked for a day to review the situation with his legal team. They followed up quickly, interviewed some of the other secretaries, and even contacted the clinic themselves to confirm parts of my story. After everything was verified, they proposed a settlement, $400,000 to avoid a lawsuit. But I wasn't finished negotiating. While I wanted justice, I didn't want Rebecca to fall into financial ruin, especially as the mother of our children. I pushed for her to keep receiving her salary for 1 more year and to have her counseling and healthcare expenses covered for the next 5 years. They agreed. After a few more meetings between our lawyers, the documents were finalized. I signed them, and a check was issued to my attorney, post-dated until the divorce was finalized so Rebecca wouldn't be able to claim any of it. I also arranged for divorce papers and a restraining order, which would prevent her from coming near our home or our daughters during the proceedings. I included a letter, explaining clearly, if she contested any part of the agreement, I would seek full custody and I would win. She would risk losing all access to the girls. The next day, when Rebecca walked into the house, completely unaware of what was waiting for her, she found me sitting at home in the early afternoon. "Robert," she said, surprised. "What are you doing home so early? And why didn't you go pick up the girls?" "I took the day off," I told her. "We need to talk. That's why I haven't picked them up yet from my mom's." She frowned, clearly thrown off. "What's so urgent that you had to take time off?" I looked her in the eyes. "A few weeks ago, I was fixing the light in our walk-in closet," I said. "And a box fell off the top shelf. What was inside that box changed everything." I placed the shoebox down on the living room table right in front of her and asked her to explain. Her overnight bag slipped from her hand and dropped to the floor with a soft thud. Her face turned ghostly pale, and for a second, the shock was plain to see. But then her expression twisted into panic. "Oh God, oh no. This can't be happening," she cried out, her voice trembling. Her knees buckled, and she perched herself on the armrest of the couch, rocking back and forth as she buried her face in her hands. She looked broken. Like someone who knew the truth had finally caught up with her. "So," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "my loyal wife, care to explain these pills? Why would you need birth control when you know I had a vasectomy after our second daughter? Unless, of course, there's something you haven't told me." "Robert, please," she begged, her voice shaking. "I can explain. You're making this sound worse than it really is. Just let me explain." Her lips quivered. Her hands trembled. Her eyes welled up, desperate for forgiveness. But I pressed on. "Unfaithful, how long has it been? You think a few tears and a story will undo the damage?" "I don't love him," she cried. "It's over, Robert. It's done. I've always loved you. Please, we have to talk this through. There has to be a way to fix it. Her blouse was soaked from tears, and her eyes were red and swollen. But her words hit hollow. How can you say you love me, Rebecca? How do you even say those words after betraying me and our daughters? After everything we've built? I'll tell you everything, she said softly. I hope you'll understand. It wasn't love, it just happened. I didn't plan any of it. Then let's talk, I said, my tone cold but calm. Let's start with that business trip to Charlotte, or should I say Rocky River? The look that came over her face. I'll never forget it. Her eyes widened, her jaw dropped, and for a moment, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. She tried to say something, but no words came out. Yes, Rebecca, I continued. I know exactly where you went. And I know why. Without a word, she turned and ran to our bedroom in tears. I stood in the living room, frozen in place, trying to decide if I should go after her. A part of me worried she might do something drastic, but I couldn't bring myself to check on her. I just couldn't. She stayed in there for 2 hours, crying behind a closed door. Eventually, she took a shower, and when she came out dressed in her robe, she looked like a shell of herself. Her face was pale, tired, and drawn with grief. She sat down at the kitchen table across from me, avoiding eye contact. Robert, she said quietly, what are you going to do? I don't want to lose you. I'll do anything to make this right. It's too late for that, I replied. Do you remember all those months when I was trying to reach you? How badly I wanted to be close to you. I would have done anything for you, but you were giving yourself to someone else. You shut me out. You let our love die. She dropped her head into her arms and wept at the table. Forgive me, Robert, she sobbed. Please, please tell me you still love me. And in that moment, I wanted to hold her. I wanted to comfort her. Because, even after everything, part of me still loved her. But I knew if I gave in, if I softened, everything would unravel. I couldn't let emotion pull me off course. In a steady voice, I told her to tell me everything, who he was, how it started, what they'd done. No more lies. So she told me. Everything. And I believed her. Because what she said lined up perfectly with what I already knew. She confessed to the affair with Eric, admitted to the abortion in Rocky River, and described their weekly motel meetings and after-hours encounters in his office. Her words were raw, painful, and honest. We barely spoke after that. The rest of the weekend passed in silence. First thing Monday morning, she was served with divorce papers at her office. Not long after, the president of the firm informed both Rebecca and Eric they were being let go. Because of the restraining order, Rebecca wasn't allowed to come back to our house. At noon, she called me, completely shattered. I told her I had sent her belongings to her mother's home and changed all the locks. There was no reason for her to come back. We were done. Later, I found out that after our phone call, she had a breakdown and had to be hospitalized. Her mother called an ambulance. Rebecca had collapsed right there in her childhood home. 2 weeks later, she agreed to the divorce terms. We arranged for her to see the girls at my mom's house for a few hours every Saturday. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Her mother told me Rebecca had fallen into deep depression. She'd lost a lot of weight, rarely left the house, and had started therapy. Losing her job and our marriage had taken a serious toll. Eventually, I allowed her more access to the girls, first supervised, then weekends at her mother's. I saw how the girls were growing closer to her again, and I started watching for signs of trouble. But there weren't any. About a year after the divorce, my mother's cancer diagnosis changed everything. She could no longer care for the girls while I was at work. That's when Rebecca reached out. She offered to step in and look after the girls during the day. I was hesitant. Rebecca, I said, I don't know if that's really a practical idea. Your parents' house is almost 25 miles away. That's a lot of travel for the girls, every single day. And I don't want them getting the wrong idea that we might get back together. I knew my words probably stung. But she didn't show it. She stayed quiet and accepted what I said without protest. The truth was, I couldn't care for the girls full-time. And I couldn't afford a nanny either. But then, the settlement from Rebecca's former employer came through. It gave me enough financial cushion to hire a nanny, someone who could care for the girls without stirring up old wounds. 1 year later, I had moved on. I was in a relationship with Helena, a kind-hearted widow with no children of her own. My daughters took to her right away. They called her by name, held her hand, and smiled when she was around. She'd become their second mother in many ways. As for Rebecca, I let her see the girls during her scheduled visits. That was the extent of our relationship.